And we'll be talking with Dave Weinberg here from the Press of Atlantic City. He's covered the Eagles for over 24 years. We'll ask about that. Dave, is this one of the latest times you can remember the Eagles playing all their divisional rivals at home?
Yeah, usually it's not surprising to have like two, but three is kind of unusual. You usually they generally kind of spread them out over the season. So but it kind of adds some excitement to the league, though. You know, when you know that you got to beat your division opponents in order to have a shot at the playoffs. So the fact that they kind of control their destiny to some point by playing those teams kind of adds an element of excitement, I think.
You know, Scott, we talked about during the first. Scott and I were talking, Dave, about the fact that coming into this, the Eagles are 2 games out of a playoff spot. Doug Pederson's first season, but this season could have been going the other way. You could be 7-5 at this point. So, Dave, I ask you, looking at Doug Pederson's first season, how much credit and blame do you give him for being successful and being only 2 games out of a playoff spot versus being 5-7 versus 7-5?
Oh, that's a tough call. Let me see. I kind of give him the same amount of blame and praise, I guess, for both records. I thought he kind of like surpassed expectations in the beginning of the season when they were 3-0. I didn't think they were that good. But the fact is, they beat the teams they needed to beat early in the season, and I think he deserves a little bit of the blame for the recent slump, though, too. It seems like his play calling has been questionable at best. And until recently, I was kind of worried that he might have lost control of the locker room a little bit, but from talking to the players and stuff today and the last couple of days, last week, I get the feeling that that's really not the case, that they still have confidence and trust in him and vice versa. So I don't think it's I would guess I'd have to give him a C in both cases. I guess they're probably about where you expected them to be at the beginning of the season.
Dave, you mentioned the play calling and how you can easily question it with Doug Pederson, especially of late.
Right.
When you look at that, is Doug Pederson, in your opinion, wearing too many hats right now for a rookie head coach? Should he just focus on managing the game and let Frank Reich take care of play calling here?
That might be the way to go, yeah. He does seem to be overwhelmed at times. However, I think that most head coaches, they do wear like at least 2 hats. I don't know of too many that kind of just oversee things without having a hands-on and one aspect of the game. Andy, you can argue that Andy Reid did it last year and giving Doug Pederson the control, but I think that was still Andy Reid's offense. And the same thing with Chip Kelly here. And when you have a defensive-minded head coach, they seem to be the guys who are really calling the situations of defense. So I don't know if he's wearing too many hats, but I do think that they should have a guy next to him for the little things, like the challenges, for example. So he's not pulling out a red flag when you only have 2 yards to gain from it. That's you should have somebody there to say, Doug, put the flag back in your pocket.
Dave, I want to ask you about Doug Pederson because you've seen numerous head coaches come through this city, from guys like Buddy Ryan to Rich Kotite to Ray Rhodes and Andy Reid and Chip Kelly. Comparing Doug Pederson's first year in Philadelphia to those guys, what kind of perspective do you have looking at those other coaches' first season compared to Doug's first season?
Ooh, that's another good one. I would put him like somewhere in the middle. Well, everybody obviously was wowed with Chip Kelly's first year, going 10-6 and making the playoffs. And Ray Rhodes did the same thing his first year too, by also winning the division and kind of he destroyed the Lions in their first playoff game too. So, but I kind of think that those guys had more talent to work with than Doug has. There's a lot of holes. They've been hit with some injuries in some key spots. Losing Lane Johnson was a big loss. And I think it's pretty clear that Howie and maybe, I guess, Doug to a certain extent, they really didn't equip the team to deal with that kind of stuff as far as from a depth perception. They didn't have enough backups, I don't think, to fill in key positions, and especially the wide receiver and the secondary. So I think he's probably done better than what Well, boy, that's tough. I'm going to say that he's probably done about what people expected. I had my doubts about him coming into the year, and I think I still have those doubts, but maybe not quite to the same extent. I think he's proven himself that he has the potential to be a pretty good head coach, but there's clearly some work to do there.
I completely agree with you. Dave Weinberger of the Atlantic City Press joining us here on the Sports Bash. Dave, on the defensive side of the ball, we heard Jim Schwartz yesterday, particularly talking about his cornerbacks, saying they have a lot of talent and that he believes in them. They're just lacking confidence and in a slump. To me, corner is one of the bigger positions of need heading into the offseason. How do you evaluate these corners? And, do you believe and agree with Schwartz that they have the talent that they need?
No, I don't agree with him now. I think Jalen Mills has a lot of ability and a lot of potential. I've kind of liked what I've seen from him. He's not afraid to get up in a free receiver's face. Big physical kind of guy. I don't think Nolan Carroll is terrible either. I mean, it's kind of like faint praise, but it seems like most of the times when he gets beat, it's not from getting burned. He's like right there, but the receiver just happens to make the play on him. Leotis McKelvin, I'm not sure of, only because he's been hurt the whole year. He pulled his hamstring in the opening game and really hasn't been able to recover from that yet. But as a group, though, I have to disagree with him. I don't think that they've been playing, up to their capabilities. I will give them a little bit of a break, though, because I think the front four has a lot to do with that too. Schwartz has been, I guess he blitzed more than usual against the Bengals, but he generally relies on his front four to generate pressure on the quarterback. They were doing a pretty good job of that earlier in the year, but not lately. And as you know, no corner can stick with a receiver for more than a second or two or three. You give a quarterback, regardless of who it is, you give them 4 or 5 or 6 seconds to look downfield for somebody, then they're always going to complete that pass. So I kind of blame the front four as well as the secondary, but they do need to play better. The secondary does.
Let's zone in more on Leotis McKelvin, because you alluded to the hamstring injury in week one. Mm-hmm. Hindsight's always 20/20, and I understand that, but did they mismanage Leotis McKelvin? Should they have shut him down for a couple weeks to let that hamstring heal better?
In retrospect, yeah, but they don't have anybody else to put in there, unfortunately, and they don't have that's one of the two positions, like I said, along with wide receiver, where there's just a glaring lack of depth there. So I guess they figured that a 70% Leotis McKelvin was better than 100%. Whoever else you want to name, Ron Brooks or whoever, Javen Watkins, or even using a Malcolm in the slot, maybe, but. That's something they probably could have done. I think maybe put Watkins back at safety and use Malcolm as slot corner, and finagle some things with Jalen Mills and Nolan Carroll on the outside. That might have been the way to go. But I really don't think that they had much of an option there. Like I said, it was either go with Leotis and hope for the best, or throw somebody out there that really wasn't able to handle it.
Dave, does it come down to something where the cornerbacks are possibly not being either put in positions to be successful? Because you look at, for example, the game against the Packers, Aaron Rodgers had between 1.8 and 2 seconds per throw to throw, and you have cornerbacks playing 10 yards off of the receivers. And then in the Bengals game, you saw these guys, their technique did not look very good. So is this something where Schwartz and the defensive staff are just not putting the cornerbacks in a position to be successful?
If you have Schwartz, he'll probably say that, yeah. Coaches are always the first to admit that, Andy Reid kind of made that famous where, I got to put these guys in better position. And to a degree, you're probably right there. But these guys are NFL players, and they should be able to handle that job no matter what kind of situation you put them in. And, quarterbacks are going to get rid of the ball. When you get guys with real quick releases, you're going to have some trouble. But you still got to be able to stick with your guy. I think the alignment, like you mentioned earlier, that might be a problem too. They're playing way too far off the ball, and that's just like you said, when you got only 1.82 seconds to get rid of it. Those underneath passes are always going to be open for you. So I would like to see them play a little bit more physical, like I mentioned with Jaden Mills. He seems to be the kind of guy that can do that, and I think he might have more success that way.
Dave, they got 4 games left And, there's some people you could probably ask 4 different Eagles fans and get 4 different predictions. You could see an 0-4, and I think there's some fans who still want to be positive and think that they could see 4-0, given that 3 of these games are at home. What do you see? How do you see this last month playing out? And I know they're mathematically still alive for the playoffs, but what are you looking for out of this team to try to consider these last 4 games, a positive month?
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I think I've gotten pretty much every game wrong in the last month and a half. But and I will say, until today, I kind of had really low expectations for them. I kind of expected them to maybe go 1-3 or even 0-4 down the stretch because the Bengals game, it was such an embarrassment that it almost looked like they kind of like, I don't want to say tanked, but they've kind of like started to look forward to next year. And even Pederson kind of alluded to that last week. But today, I got a different vibe in the locker room. Talking with Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod and a couple of the other guys, Carson Wentz. I got the feeling that there seems to be a renewed sense of determination and fight that I hadn't seen in the last couple of weeks. And I think they're kind of like questioning them. They were questioning themselves, and I think they really want to find the answers over this last month, just to show people that they are closer to the team that started 3-0 than the one that's been 2-7 in the last 9 games. And I'm going to be slightly optimistic, and I'm going to say they're going to go 3-1. They're going to win these last 3 home games and maybe lose to the Ravens in Baltimore. That's probably not going to be enough to get in the playoffs, but at least they'll provide a glimmer of hope for next season, I guess.
They're certainly end the season strong. I'm intrigued by what you elaborate a little more about what you found in the locker room today. Why do you think they had that feeling of coming out with a little more fight? Was there any kind of players only meeting, or was there something that kick-started that you were able to find out?
Well, Coach Pederson always meets with his veterans committee before the start of practice every week. And I know that he met with them again, either it was like Monday or yesterday. I'm not quite sure which. But I think, to be honest with you, I think they were embarrassed by what they put out there on Sunday against the Bengals. And it's more of a kind of a personal thing. Their pride's been questioned. Their heart has been questioned. And they really took that personally, especially like Zach Ertz and Rodney McLeod. Everybody's talking about the block that Ertz missed against Vontaze Perfect, and McLeod kind of didn't seem to give his all on the tackle on the goal line. But the players all stood behind those guys. Even Wentz did, and Pederson and Schwartz as well. And I just think that they're an angrier team now, and they don't like it when people, like I said, no player likes it when someone questions their effort or their heart. And I think they really wanted to do their best to kind of change the conception that some of the fans have about them.
We're talking with Dave Weinberg, Eagles beat writer for the Press of Atlantic City, here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Dave, you mentioned the possibility of them winning those 3 home games against the division. And one of the things Pederson mentioned in the presser today was about the return of Lane Johnson, about the fact that, Lane could slide right in for the Giants and Cowboys games. Do you think that is as much of a possibility as Pederson made it sound today? And do you think that could be the real thing that could make a difference for them in those games?
I don't know. I think the Giants game might be a stretch only because it's a Thursday night. So I don't know if he'll have enough time to get ready for it. Well, he's certainly well rested, so maybe that'll help. But I don't know that a right tackle was really necessarily like a difference maker. I don't know if that's going to be the thing that like pushes them over the top. But I mean, he'll help though. I mean, the sooner you can get, I guess, Alan Barber back to left guard and have somebody else, as good as or definitely even better at right tackle, then that's bound to help the entire offense. So. I know they really want him to play the last 2 games, but I don't know how feasible it is to expect him to be playing against the Giants.
Dave, staying on the offensive line, I did want to ask you, one of the things that's frustrated me this year is Jason Kelce. I don't know what's going on with him and Carson Wentz. I don't know if they're not communicating well. They just don't have very good chemistry, but it seems like every week there's at least 1 or 2 plays that I'm watching on TV, and I'm looking, and I'm just wanting to pull my hair out because I feel like the center quarterback exchange and communication should be better than anybody else on the line. And it seems like Kelsey is never on the same page.
Yeah, and I don't know why that is, because I know that they meet every week, at least twice a week, to go over film of the upcoming defenses. They spend a lot of time together. They work a lot together after practice on the field with their exchanges and stuff. But that's a real surprising development, like you said, because that should be second nature to them by now. You would think that they wouldn't be able to there wouldn't be any mishandled snaps or any problems with any communication. So the fact that it's still going on is something that they have to be concerned about. Kelsey, to be honest, I don't think he's had the best year anyway, and that's just kind of added on to it.
Dave, there's been a lot of talk about Deshaun Jackson. Everybody's going to see him back here in Philadelphia again this week. And the talk, particularly down in Washington, it sounds like, has been heating up about him possibly coming back to the Eagles. Where do you see that going? Do you think this coming off season that Deshaun Jackson will be coming back to Philadelphia?
Deshaun Jackson will go wherever pays him the most money. He doesn't give a hoot about Eagles or Redskins or loyalty or anything. Anybody that's going to give him the money, that's where he's going to go. And if the Eagles are willing to do that, quite frankly, I think they may be better off just moving on without him. He's going to be 31. I know he's still one of the fastest receivers in the league, but if they're truly in this rebuilding process, then I think you might just want to go in a different direction, maybe draft somebody or maybe sign somebody a little bit younger than Deshaun. I have no doubt that he can still play at a high level, but I'm just not quite sure that he would fit here. And if he's not getting the ball, then there's going to be some problems in the locker room, which is known to happen with him. I'm kind of surprised because when we first started, when they played the first time this season, the fifth game of the year, Deshaun was on the conference call, and he made it pretty clear that his first preference was to come back to the Redskins. Whether that'll happen, whether they'll be willing to give him the money that he wants, and plus the fact that his production has kind of dropped off this year, and maybe he will go somewhere else. But honestly, I don't think that he's going to be an Eagle next year.
Staying on the topic of wide receivers, Nelson Aguilar got back into action last week. Didn't drop any balls. What do you think? What do you make of him as you see him milling around the locker room? As as he gets ready for another game here, where is he mentally? Do you see that he's turned a corner?
I think so. Yeah, I really do. I think he's in the right place mentally that he needs to be. He was clearly not in that place after the what was it? I forget what game it was now. It was Seahawks. That's right. It's been so long. The Seahawks game. But yeah, I think that he seems to have his self-confidence back, which is a big thing when you're an NFL player. The minute you start to doubt yourself, that's when mistakes start to happen. Like when you make one error, and then the next thing, then it just keeps piling on. The next thing you know, you're really struggling. People are booing you, and but I think that was just what he needed, was that game against the Bengals to get his confidence back a little bit. Like I said, like you mentioned, he didn't drop any passes, didn't make any big plays either. But I think that was a definite step in the right direction. I would expect him to have even a better game on Sunday against the Redskins.
Sticking with the wide receivers, Dave, Doug Pederson brought up the fact that even with Matthews coming back, he liked to keep Paul Turner on the field in the offense. With Jordan Matthews back, what kind of role do you think there would be for Paul Turner, considering most of his catches came in the second half when there was no Matthews and there was no DGB?
Yeah, and the fact that DGB is still bothered a little bit by his ribs, I think it is. Or is that? No, his core or something.
He has a oblique contusion.
Correct, okay. Abs, and all right. Yeah, maybe that's an.
It's okay, Dave. We don't know what that means either. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But yeah, I'm not as sold on Paul Turner as a lot of other people. I mean, the fact that he was on the practice squad for 11 weeks, that 31 other teams had the opportunity to sign him, and nobody even bothered. I don't want to downplay what he did against the Bengals, but like you mentioned, a lot of that stuff was after the game was already decided, And, I remember how everybody was really excited about Bryce Treggs after, the first Giants game. He caught that long pass, but you really haven't seen much of him since. I think now the teams have seen Paul Turner. They might want to defend against him a little bit differently. So I'm not really sure what his role is going to turn out to be. I would like to see them rely a lot more on the running game than they've been doing. And the fact that Ryan Matthews is supposedly back healthy, I think that's going to help a lot. It takes a lot of pressure off the wide receivers, takes a lot of pressure off of Carson Wentz. Doesn't feel like he has to do it because there's no reason for him to be throwing the ball 60 times. So hopefully that the running backs will be able to take some of that pressure off this Sunday, and the receivers won't have to have that much pressure on them.
Dave, kind of a crazy week. Doug Pederson has kind of called out his team's effort, rightfully so, a little bit when you go back to after the Cincinnati game this week. Now you have Jay Gruden in Washington who called out his team's effort after the game in Arizona. It really challenged his team, which is certainly has a better shot to make the playoffs than the Eagles do. But what do you make of the two head coaches here coming into this game, and how desperate are they at this point?
I think that the Redskins are probably in a more desperate situation because they have a better shot at making the playoffs. As of now, they wouldn't be in. I think it's the Giants and Tampa Bay or Atlanta both have the inside track for the two wild cards.
Correct.
So I think it's coming upon the Redskins. I think they're facing more of a must-win situation. The Eagles talk about like they want to, but I think it's more of, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's more of a pride situation for them. I think they just want to play out these last 4 games and see how the cards, play out. They're hoping that maybe they can sweep, and then 9-7 might be good enough. I personally don't think so. I think you had to get to 10 to get a wild card spot, and it's the fact that the Redskins still have a shot at doing that. I think that there's more of a desperation mode with them, I think, than there is for the Eagles.
Dave, before we let you go, I want to ask you, looking ahead to the Redskins game, what do you think is going to be the key for the Eagles to possibly get that win at home this Sunday?
Yeah, I'm actually picking them to win. I don't know why. Like I said, my record's not the best. So the key, I think, is to put some pressure on Cousins. They definitely have to do that. There's no sacks in the last 2 games, and that's just unforgivable.